It is a sold-out event today, and we're very much looking forward to the conversation that we will have today. I want to make just a couple of points as we start out the effort this morning. The first is that this should be an interactive effort, so it should not just be a bunch of talking heads up here on stage. What we want to do is we want to hear from each and every one of you about whatever ideas you might have. And I will tell you where we will end up at the end of the day today, and that is that we want you to be the drumbeat of the American heart for the future that we want to create here with the clean energy economy. And that means that when you leave here today, hopefully you will take some of the messages that we have developed together, and that you will send the message loud and clear across the United States of America that the time has come for a clean energy future for the United States of America. We this morning are incredibly graced that you who are here represent 39 states all across the country. This is, as I understand, the largest of these forums that we have had, and it shows the great interest that all of you have with respect to this issue on clean energy. We have people from as far north as Alaska, as far south as Texas and Florida, Alabama and Georgia, so from all over the country. Those of you here in this room on the front row and in the back row and in between, you represent the sportsmen, women, and the business leaders, conservationists, and leaders of Indian country, just to name a few of the constituencies represented. Although we have great representation in this room today, you should also know that across the country, we are being joined through the internet webcast, which is www.whitehouse.gov/live, and through that interactive website, we actually will be able to take questions to the panel as we move forward. We have a great set of panels today. This effort would not have been able to have been brought together had it not been for the great work of a number of people, but I especially want to mention Brian Screener. Where are you, Brian? There he is, that guy in the back. He's from Montana. He knows what it's all about, to see Glacier National Park without glaciers. Callie Hanley, where's Callie? Callie, who sent out the invitations and who had to tell thousands of people they couldn't come here because there was only so much room. Callie, thank you for working on this. And Greg Nielsen from the Office of Public Engagedness here at the White House. Greg in the back, thank you for doing this. Now, our agenda today will be that I'm going to make these short welcoming remarks, and then we'll hear from this panel on renewable energy on public lands and job creation. And we'll have an intermission at 10:30. That will be followed by a climate impact and adaptation panel of some great people who you will hear from, and then we'll have an opportunity to interact. Let me make just a couple of opening comments before I introduce the panel. First, with respect to the United States Department of Interior and the mission that we execute on behalf of the people of America and on behalf of the interests that we represent, I often struggle to say, what is this mission of this department that can take you with our responsibilities from the Arctic in the North Slope of Alaska all the way to the Everglades and down into the Big Bend country of Texas and the water issues of the San Francisco Bay Delta, and all the way to the North Woods of Maine and 562 Indian tribes across most of the states of the United States, where we have great responsibilities in our trust responsibilities. We're working on so many issues that are part of this department. And I think that the mission is a very simple one. It's a mission where we have been given over time the responsibility to be the shepherds of America's natural resources and America's history. And we do that whether it's at the Statue of Liberty or Flight 93 or the creation of a Martin Luther King Memorial on the Mall, and we do it with 150 million acres of wildlife refuges and water management responsibilities, and the list goes on. But it is a great department that we have the honor to work on behalf of President Obama. From day one, when the president-elect at the time asked me to become the Secretary of the Department of Interior, and he asked me if I would leave the United States Senate to come and run this department, we had a conversation about what the highest priority would be for this department. And that conversation was a very simple one, and that is that we, as the Department of Interior, would be a member of a team that would bring about a new energy frontier for the United States of America, and that we would be partners with the rest of our agencies in bringing about a solution to the realities of climate change which we face. And for the last 9 months, our team at Interior has worked closely with the White House and members of Congress as we have moved forward with that agenda. In brief, you will hear much more about this, but ICR department is being very much the energy suppliers of the United States of America. We produce about 30% of the natural gas that's consumed in the United States, about 30% of our oil, just from our public lands, both onshore and offshore, and we produce about 40% of the coal that we use here in America. But beyond the conventional fossil fuels, which this department has had responsibility for overseeing its production of from the public lands, we also have opened up a new chapter for America in the Department of Interior. And that's through our efforts to stand up renewable energy and really to engage in the renewable energy revolution that we see spreading across the United States of America. And so the efforts you'll hear about today are about how we are capturing the wind from the high plains and from the deserts in Arizona. And we are capturing the wind energy off the Atlantic coast, and we're capturing the power of the sun in the deserts of the Sunwest and geothermal across the public lands. And to put that just in perspective on the magnitude of the effort that we are undertaking, we expect that by the end of next year, December 2010, just in California, in the southwest part of the country, California, Arizona, and Nevada, that we will stand up close to 5,000 megawatts of power, mostly from solar energy, some from wind energy, just in that part of the country. That's the equivalent of the amount of power from 15 medium-sized coal-fired power plants. That's the kind of active agenda that we are working on, and you'll hear some more about that today. And the number of jobs created just from those projects that we have fast-tracked across the West will be somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 50,000 jobs that will be created as part of this clean energy economy. In addition, as we have moved forward with the direction from President Obama to tackle the challenges of climate change, this department, through the management of 20% of the land assets of the United States, through our land managers and through our scientists, are very much at the forefront of chartering that new frontier on how we address the reality of climate change. And you will hear from the many people in the Department of Interior who are working on that signature issue of our time. With that, what I would like to do at this point is to turn it over to our Renewable Energy and Public Land and Job Creation panel. And they are Steve Black, who is Counselor on Energy in the Secretary's Office. Steve is a partner who, in a big firm in Denver a long time ago, who joined me to be the Deputy Attorney General for Natural Resources in Colorado. He was one of the principal authors of the 2005 Energy Policy Act, as well as the 2007 Energy Policy Act when I was in the United States Senate. Next to him is Wilma Lewis, who is a prosecutor, former U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, former Inspector General for the Department of Interior, and now Assistant Secretary appointed by President Obama to run the Land and Minerals section of our department. Sitting next to Wilma Lewis is Bob Abbey. Bob Abbey is a 30-year employee within the Bureau of Land Management who had gone on to retirement and was doing some great things out in the other world when we brought him back in to help us lead the future for the 250 million plus acres that we oversee through the Bureau of Land Management. And next to Bob Abbey is Liz Birnbaum, who came to us with a long experience, including working in the United States House of Representatives, and who runs Minerals Management Service, which an agency by itself alone last year brought in about $24 billion into the Treasury of the Department of the Interior. They collectively are responsible for conventional energy, including the future of the Outer Continental Shelf. They collectively are responsible for our renewable energy future, and they're involved with us on the many reform efforts that we have undertaken at the Department of the Interior. So give the panel a round of applause. And we'll go in the order of Steve Black, Wilma Lewis, Bob Abbey, and Liz, and then we'll have questions and answers. But before I turn it over to Steve, I see at least one member of the United States House of Representatives who is in the audience. And in Spanish, we call her the madrina, the godmother, because she does so much for all of us. But that is Congresswoman Grace Napolitano. Please stand, give her a round of applause. Thank you for being here, Grace. Steve Black.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and thank you all for joining us today. I thought I would try to set the stage this morning and then leave plenty of time for my colleagues on the panel and questions and answers. As the Secretary said, we very much appreciate you being here today. We welcome our audience online and through C-SPAN. Thank you for broadcasting this. This really is an opportunity for us to hear from you. And so, as the Secretary said, we will try to keep our comments brief. For those of you who know me, it's a real pleasure to sit next to Wilma Lewis and have her lead this team. She brings, obviously, a great degree of experience and wisdom to the effort, and we are grateful for her leadership. So thank you. And Bob Abbey is responsible for, as he'll tell you, I think, what did you say, 265 million acres? 256. And the reason that's important, and as the Secretary said, this is a historic time. We are here today because of the unique opportunities that are presented by a challenge to all of us to build up a clean energy economy. But it's really more than that. It's an imperative, and some would say a crisis, that involves the convergence of three dynamics. One is, of course, the economy, and this President's and this administration's effort to stand up clean energy jobs, green jobs that will help power the economy into the 21st century. The climate crisis, of course, is an imperative for all of us to reduce carbon pollution, put a price on carbon that will send the right market signals to build that economy. And then, of course, our dependence on foreign oil. All three of those imperatives come together at this time. For 40 years, presidents in the White House have talked about the holy grail of energy independence. And Republicans and Democrats alike have tried to implement policies that would help us accomplish that goal. Today, in this administration, we really have the unique challenge of the climate crisis, the economic crisis, and an energy security crisis that drives all of us to look for solutions that will help power our country, create jobs, and reduce our dependence on foreign oil. The opportunities on public lands are enormous, and the reason it's so significant to think about the scale of the land mass that BLM manages and that the department manages is that what we're talking about here today is just a fraction of those land resources to power a large fraction of our economy. The Secretary in June set aside 1,000 square miles, or 660,000 acres of public lands for study, solar study areas where BLM is paying, using stimulus money to pay for NEPA. We are doing a programmatic environmental impact statement in each of those 24 areas. The solar resource, just in that 0.25% of the land managed by BLM, is equivalent to between 25 and 45 gigawatts of power. So to put that in perspective, the country has an installed electric capacity of about 1,000 gigawatts. So already, just on those land resources in Southern California, Nevada, Arizona alone, there is an enormous potential to power our country with clean energy. Why is that so important? The connection between energy security and clean energy through electricity. Obviously, we have a growing economy. We're trying to create a vehicle fleet that is powered by electricity and to reduce our carbon pollution. So we are, at the Department of Interior, very engaged, obviously, on the Hill in an effort to put a price on carbon. But this Secretary and this administration is not waiting for a new law. We are using existing authorities to map out solar energy zones, transmission corridors, opportunities for all of you represented in this room to invest in, innovate, and create a clean energy economy for the future. We have an opportunity, as the President has said, either to continue to be the largest importer of foreign oil in the world or the largest exporter of clean energy jobs and technologies, innovation that will position this country as a leader, continue to position this country as a leader for the future. There are a number of ongoing efforts on BLM land and through the department. The Secretary has recently signed an MOU with the state of California that will help facilitate the siting and permitting of renewable energy projects on public land. That's a very important model and opportunity for us to work with each of you as partners and stakeholders in this process. We want to learn from that experience. We want to get your feedback and input. It's critically important that we partner going forward so that we are making the right siting decisions, we're making the right mitigation decisions, we're doing this right from the start. Ron Resch, who many of you know, was in Southern California for the Solar Industry Conference last week and introduced what he called a solar Bill of Rights, and among other things, he pointed out the footprint that already exists on public lands for oil and gas development. 45 million acres under lease for oil and gas development. 0 so far under lease or right-of-way on public lands for clean energy technologies, particularly solar. Obviously, we have some wind stood up on public lands, and we continue to permit wind projects. But the opportunities for solar are critically important and very high on this Secretary's agenda. That oil and gas production will continue, to be sure, and this Secretary has already leased some 2 million acres of public land onshore and offshore for conventional fuels. That will continue, but we need to diversify our fuel source, diversify our power sources, and move this country into a clean energy economy. So I'm going to turn this over to Wilma at this point, and again, we look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Steve, and good morning to all of you. As Assistant Secretary for Land and Minerals Management, I am very honored to have the privilege of helping to engage the department's energy bureaus in the presidential and the secretarial agenda for climate change and clean energy. I'm also pleased that you're all here today, here in person, here online, here by television, not only to hear from us from the Department of the Interior, those of us who are here on panels, but equally important, indeed, even more important, to hear from you, to engage in a constructive dialogue on issues of critical importance to the nation and to the American people. My job as Assistant Secretary is to serve Secretary Salazar in the guidance and policy development of 3 bureaus, the Bureau of Land Management, the Minerals Management Service, and the Office of Surface Mining. In the renewable energy context, which of course is integral to a clean energy economy, the Bureau of Land Management and the Minerals Management Service are at the forefront. Indeed, the work of these bureaus, which involves the implementation of programs that result in the development and production of energy, is vital, absolutely vital to our renewable energy future. Steve has already touched on the tremendous potential for renewable energy. The potential on the U.S. Outer Continental Shelf, of which 1.7 billion acres, of course, is managed by the Minerals Management Service, that renewable energy potential is tremendous. On the Atlantic coast alone, there is the potential to generate 1,000 gigawatts of clean wind energy. This would be equivalent, in practical terms, to as much energy as the entire electric generating capacity in the United States today. You'll hear later from Liz Birnbaum, who is our Director of the Minerals Management Service, and she will talk some more about how we are working with the Northeastern and the Mid-Atlantic states on wind energy development programs. With appropriate environmental protections, we expect to see significant growth in offshore wind development in the future. However, to move this agenda forward, we need the investors, we need the technology developers, we need the manufacturers, we need the utilities, the conservation community, the states, the tribes, other federal agencies, and the coastal public. We also need strong and good leadership, the kind of leadership that's already been shown by Secretary Salazar in the spring when he removed long-standing obstacles to interagency agreement on offshore jurisdiction, which was consummated in a critical memorandum of understanding with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. This was followed quickly by the release of a framework for offshore wind development issued by the Minerals Management Service on Earth Day of this year. This is a kind of leadership that will be instrumental in achieving our clean energy goals. Turning to the onshore part, the BLM's management of, as we have heard, 256 million acres of the nation's landmass includes lands with vast potential for solar, geothermal, and wind development. In the Southwest, for example, as you've heard, solar energy potential is just huge, although we must, of course, be sure to protect precious habitat, recreation uses, and water supplies in the process of generating our solar power. BLM also manages lands with tremendous wind energy potential and with deep reserves of potential energy that could be tapped by both conventional and enhanced geothermal technologies. Again, to access these renewable energies so plentiful across the West, we need to work with our partners throughout the industry, conservation, and government, and we also, once again, need good leadership. Secretary Salazar and the President are obviously committed to this onshore renewable energy agenda, just as they are removing stale obstructions to offshore wind development. They are also putting forward a multi-dimensional onshore renewable energy agenda, from technology development and funding incentives for renewable producers all the way to the historic memorandum that Steve alluded to earlier, this memorandum of understanding between California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger and Secretary Salazar that coordinates federal and state energy reviews. In a few minutes, you'll hear from the BLM director, Bob Abbey, who will describe some of our efforts to move solar, wind, and geothermal projects forward with full public review, with care for our environment and the multiple uses of our public lands, and with an eye to a fair return to the public for the use of public resources. I have no doubt that we can move forward responsibly with the clean energy agenda. To achieve our goals, however, I think we need to touch three bases. First, we'll need to manage our responsibilities inside the Department of the Interior more efficiently and effectively, including smoothing operations among our bureaus. Secondly, we must reach out to other federal agencies, state governments, tribal leaders, and local and county governments. And third, we must work closely with our stakeholders, from industry to conservation, toward a new consensus that emphasizes domestic energy production in an environmentally responsible manner. Let me start and say a few words for a moment about the first task, improving our own processes and programs and operating more efficiently and more effectively. You may be aware of some public activities that are designed to achieve this end, such as the creation of our renewable energy coordination offices and teams in key states including California, Nevada, Arizona, and Wyoming. I'm sure you'll hear a bit more about those from Bob Abbey. What you may not be aware of, however, is the unprecedented emphasis on improved coordination within our bureaus, where the Bureau of Land Management and the Minerals Management Service are creating new teams to review development proposals thoroughly and efficiently, and to develop important environmental documents, such as the Programmatic Solar Energy Environmental Impact Statement. More is definitely coming. We anticipate further improvements in our administration of energy programs. I know that we can do our job better, and we are all fully engaged in the department in what we believe will be a sensible approach to reform that will enable us to achieve the President's and the Secretary's clean energy and climate goals. Our second task, to improve coordination with other partners in government, is also well underway. I'm happy to report that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is a partner with our energy bureaus, reviewing development proposals and study documents. As a result, we will know places where we should not propose development because of concerns for wildlife, and we will put the right kinds of conditions on development that does in fact move forward. This cooperation extends beyond the federal government. I mentioned previously, for example, the agreement in California bringing together federal and California review processes. We are also working closely with the Western Governors Association and individual states. Issues such as sage grouse protection, conservation of migratory birds and raptors demand this kind of cooperation and understanding. We are committed to pursuing the clean energy agenda in a manner that respects the rich natural heritage of the West. We must proceed with this agenda without compromising our signature landscapes, our natural resources, our wildlife, and our cultural resources. Finally, we must reach out to our stakeholders, all stakeholders. We encourage you to let your voices be heard productively and constructively so as to assist in informing us in the decisions that we make and the actions that we take. We also need your help in investing and in implementing programs and plans across the onshore and offshore areas managed by the Bureau of Land Management and the Minerals Management Service. We need your energy to implement clean energy. We need your investment of time and ideas, and we need your investment of capital and your entrepreneurship. These are the gears that must smoothly and efficiently click together to achieve our clean energy goals. This is an extraordinary time to engage in large ideas, to meet long-standing challenges, to grow into the potential we have as Americans and as human beings. I'm deeply inspired by the President's vision, and I'm constantly refreshed and energized by Secretary Salazar, who brings strong visionary leadership to the department that deserves this particular brand of thinking and direction. I am also grateful for your presence here today and for your invaluable contributions that you have already made and that I know you will continue to make to our joint efforts. Thank you.
Good morning. For those of you that I've not met, I'm Bob Abbey. I'm the Director of the Bureau of Land Management. And it's mornings like today that I'm reminded that I happen to hold one of the best jobs in all of government. I not only get to interact with the likes of Secretary Salazar and other members of this distinguished panel, but I also work with over 9,000 Bureau of Land Management employees located across the nation who are working each day with members of the public to make our country a little bit better. The BLM, as you already heard from the two previous speakers, but I'm not going to let you get by without me saying it either. We manage 256 million acres of land, by far more land than any other federal agency. But it's not the amount of land that we manage, it's how these lands are managed that are important. Most of the public lands managed by the Bureau of Land Management are managed for multiple uses, and we continue to make appropriate public lands available for the exploration and production of domestic energy sources, whether that source of energy is oil, gas, coal, solar, wind, geothermal, or biomass. As Secretary Salazar has acknowledged numerous times, the clean energy potential of America's public and private land is staggering. The lands managed by the Bureau of Land Management are at the forefront of our new energy frontier, and it's exciting to be working in this agency and with an industry that's making our potential a reality. Of the 256 million acres managed by the Bureau of Land Management, we've identified 23 million acres of public lands with commercial solar potential. We've received more than 200 applications for solar energy projects, and if all of these existing project proposals were approved, they would encompass more than 1.5 million acres. Due to the interests that have been expressed by the solar industry, the Bureau of Land Management has tentatively identified 24 solar study areas where additional studies are being conducted to determine the area's feasibility for this type of development. Based upon the results of this analysis, the Bureau of Land Management could decide to designate some or all of these solar study areas as solar energy zones where development will be more focused. In the meantime, we continue to work on the applications that we've received to evaluate the projects and to make determinations and decisions regarding the merits of each of these projects, and these decisions will be reached in the near future. Nearly 21 million acres of BLM public lands have been identified as having potential for wind energy. We've authorized 178 rights-of-ways for wind energy site testing. To date, we've approved 28 wind development projects with an installed capacity of 437 megawatts. Some 111 million acres of public lands are currently available for geothermal leasing. We've estimated that these areas have a resource potential of 39,000 megawatts. The BLM currently administers 29 geothermal power plants that use federal resources in California, Nevada, and Utah, which have a net capacity of over 1,200 megawatts. The geothermal industry has the potential to be a great contributor in helping to meet our nation's energy needs. Our energy vision, as articulated by President Obama, that is now being carried out by Secretary Salazar, is much more than just about producing megawatts and delivering energy to the marketplace. This shared vision is about producing megawatts in the most environmentally responsible manner. And we're already seeing early dividends from the efforts that have been expended by this administration. For example, on October 12th, Secretary Salazar and I participated in the dedication of Arizona's first commercial-scale wind energy development on BLM public lands just north of Heber, Arizona. This project is currently producing clean, renewable energy for over 1,500 homes in the Phoenix area. The project covers approximately 6,000 acres of public, state, and private land, but less than 2% of that project area is impacted by development. The majority of the public lands remain available for cattle grazing, for hunting, and other purposes. During the peak of the construction of that particular project, over 200 direct construction jobs were created, as well as hundreds of support jobs. Dedication of a phase one of a 200 megawatt wind project in Milford, Utah is scheduled for November the 10th. Phase two construction is slated to begin shortly after that dedication. The Milford Wind Project, when completed, will provide power to roughly 50,000 homes. This past Thursday, a ribbon-cutting ceremony took place for the Blue Mountain Geothermal Power Plant near Winnemucca, Nevada. The power plant has electrical power generation capacity of over 49 megawatts. There are many other renewable projects that are under review today, and many of these are expected to be approved by the Bureau of Land Management. The wind projects currently proposed that will be ready for construction by the end of 2010 will provide enough electricity to power more than 400,000 homes. If all of the approved proposed solar projects that are ready for construction and by the end of 2010 would be approved, then we could produce enough energy to power 1.8 million homes. Power from these projects produces virtually no greenhouse gases, and when installed in an environmentally sensitive manner, harnesses abundant energy that nature itself provides. Progress is being made in making appropriate public lands available for renewable energy projects, but as mentioned by others, we have to be smart about how we're going about reviewing these projects and when making decisions. For example, solar projects, unlike some other forms of energy sources, represents a long-term dedicated use of public lands. The proper siting of projects and related transmission is the key to increasing and delivering clean energy while conserving important natural landscapes and important wildlife habitat. Those of us who are working for the Department of Interior are committed to working closely with federal and state regulatory agencies, with local and tribal governments, as well as with members of the public as we make land use decisions relating to our domestic energy supplies. And while the challenges that we face in transitioning to a more diverse or diversified energy portfolio are not simple ones, the fact that we're willing to take on these challenges is an indication of our resolve to meet today's energy needs while positioning our nation for an even greater future. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Liz Birnbaum. I'm the Director of the Minerals Management Service. I'm very happy to be here and be a part of today's discussion on the climate change agenda and new energy economy agenda for this administration. The Minerals Management Service has a very important role to play out here, and although I'll acknowledge that Bob's right that he's responsible for the largest area of land onshore, the Minerals Management Service is actually responsible for the management of energy development on over 1.7 billion acres of the Outer Continental Shelf. There's a huge potential out there, and we're very happy to be involved in working on it. MMS is also involved in the administration's climate change agenda. We're responsible for regulating air quality in the Gulf of Mexico. We have a large marine research program that contributes to understanding of global warming and its impact in the oceans. But today I'll focus on our renewable energy agenda. We have several goals for our renewable energy program. We would like to encourage research and development in what is a very new area of energy generation. We are looking to set up commercial renewable energy development in the oceans. We are hoping to assist the states in meeting their renewable portfolio standards, particularly in the Northeast. And we're going to be working very closely with the states and tribes in developing energy and ensuring that we have coordinated all the interests locally. And in addition, we are hoping to establish strong technological standards for what is a very new industry and is just figuring out what the technology standards should be for offshore renewable development. All of this we are going to do while also actively participating in the President's and Secretary Salazar's agenda for ocean policy, which our work is just one piece of. As President Obama said last spring, we have a choice to make. We can remain one of the world's leading importers of foreign oil, or we can make the investments that will allow us to become the world's leading exporter of renewable energy. We can let climate change continue to go unchecked, or we can help to stop it. We can let the jobs of tomorrow be created abroad, or we can create those jobs right here in America and lay the foundation for lasting prosperity. We've heard a lot of politicians say things like this before. To me, it's really very exciting to be involved in an administration that's really making that promise real. We're right on the cusp of a new energy economy and also simply a new energy technology for the Outer Continental Shelf. And we are planning to make that happen. President Obama has said he would like to stand up offshore wind in his first term, and we're on track to make that happen. As Steve mentioned earlier, within a few months after taking office, Secretary Salazar cut through what had been years of bureaucratic delays in setting up a process for renewable energy development offshore. That jurisdiction was given to MMS in the 2005 Energy Act, and there simply hadn't been a process set up for entities who were concerned with what they would do to develop offshore wind or wave or current technologies. We set up a framework that the President announced on Earth Day. We also, at the same time, set up this MOU with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to deal with jurisdictional conflicts that had existed over hydrokinetic energy. And so now we have a clear path. A few months later, we had the first 5 leases offered for meteorological towers offshore New Jersey and Delaware to support future wind energy projects. We now have our first 2 commercial wind applications offshore Virginia, which I consider very exciting. People have actually decided that they know where they want to invest. And we also are going to be issuing RFIs, that's requests for interest, which are our first step in establishing commercial leasing for New Jersey, Delaware, and Virginia in the next few weeks. These projects will be clean, renewable sources of energy that will help states meet their renewable portfolio standards. Because of constraints on land use in the Northeast in particular, A lot of states have difficulty in figuring out how they're going to establish large new projects to meet their renewable portfolio standards. But the offshore provides a wonderful possibility for these states, and we're working very closely with them. Massachusetts has a goal of establishing 15% renewable energy by 2020, Rhode Island 16% by 2020, New Jersey 22.5% by 2021, and so on. In addition, of course, Congress is considering additional incentives for developing stronger renewable energy technology in the country. And the nearly 1,000 gigawatts of energy potential offshore the Atlantic in wind alone should help contribute to achieving those goals. A huge part of this for us is developing a close working relationship with states, tribes, and local governments. Part of the framework for offshore renewable technology that we developed suggested setting up federal state task forces to work together and try to deal with problems before they arise. We now have requests from 5 states and are working with Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Delaware, and Virginia in setting up those task forces. The first meeting of the Delaware task force was last week, and we anticipate meetings with the other states in the next few weeks. So we are working very closely also with the New England and Middle Atlantic governors, who have decided to develop a joint partnership to promote coordinated energy development, transmission offshore, and we will work very closely with them in solving a regional offshore energy development problem. Of course, renewable energy projects aren't limited to the East Coast. We're also talking to California, Oregon, Washington, Alaska. Those are areas where traditional wind towers may not work, and so we're talking about really a very new technology agenda also for floating turbines, for wave technology, current technology, tidal technology, where we can take advantage of the energy in the ocean as well. That is where industry comes in. That's where technological development comes in. That's where we're really going to be contributing to a new energy economy for the United States. There are challenges for us in the process, but there are challenges for industry in developing the technology, and we expect to see that there will be new job creation as we look at R&D, manufacturing, fabrication of all these new offshore technologies. President Obama actually said last week when he was discussing these things at MIT, we've always been about innovation, we've always been about discovery, it's in our DNA, and that's what this new energy frontier, new energy economy is all about, creating jobs for American citizens, taking advantage of American innovation, and providing a real revolution in technology and energy production in the United States. I'm very proud to support the President on his climate change agenda. I'm very happy to be running the Minerals Management Service at a time when we're right on the cusp of having a whole new energy industry offshore the United States. And I thank you very much. I'll take questions.
Thank you very much, Liz, and thank you to the panel. For me, every day that I get to come to work for President Obama as the Secretary of Interior, the thing that is most inspiring and empowering to me is the fact that I get to work with the greatest team, I believe, ever assembled to run the Department of the Interior. You heard from some of them here. You'll be hearing from many of them as the day goes on. But because there's going to be some mission where you'll be able to talk to people, I just want to quickly go through and just, I'll just introduce them, and I want them to stand up. Tom Strickland, Assistant Secretary for Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and Chief of Staff. Sam Hamilton, in charge of the Fish and Wildlife Refuges, 550 of them, 150 million acres. John Jarvis, running the National Park Service, 391 units all over the country. Ann Castle, Assistant Secretary for Water and Science, that's U.S. Geological Survey, Bureau of Reclamation. Larry Echohawk, Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs, hitting home runs every day on a whole host of fronts. Kip Batten, our Science Advisor within the Secretary's office, Kip Batten. And David Hayes, the Deputy Secretary of the Department of Interior. I keep hearing about great things we're taking across the goal line, and he's in charge of a whole host of them. And next to him is Ned Farquhar, Assistant Secretary for Land and Minerals, right out of New Mexico. and Lizzie Marsters, who's making sure we're all running on time up here. So Lizzie Marsters, who works very much in our department. There's a part of our renewable energy agenda which is huge, and you'll hear some from Ann Castle later on today, but one of the people that will be making sure that it happens is the Commissioner of the Bureau of Reclamation. And he probably knows more about these issues because of his work with the Senate Energy Committee for a very long time, and that is Mike Connor, the Commissioner of the Bureau of Reclamation, who's standing in the back. So any of you who are interested in water, make sure you water and hydropower, and not in the sense that they're going to go build a whole bunch of dams, but there's a lot of water power that we can essentially harness the energy from to create renewable energy. Did I miss anybody that I should be introducing? I have some other staff in here. Anyway, they're all wonderful. We are going to transition and take some questions. Before I do that, I want to make the following announcements. Congressman Jay Inslee from the state of Washington. Congressman, who are you? He's in the back there. Congressman, thank you for joining us. Thank you very much. And later on this afternoon, this is a renewable energy panel. We're going to do a climate impact panel at 10:40. And then at 1:15, we're going to have another panel, which Tom Strickland will lead, called Implementing Interior's Renewable Energy and Climate Change Agenda. And the first speaker for that panel will be Jim Messina, the Deputy Chief of Staff for the President. And you'll be hearing from some of the other people who are working in our department. Let me, I guess if I maybe just make one quick comment about this panel and some of the conversation that you have just heard from them on. This is real stuff. You know, this is not just science fiction that we're working on. You know, I had, as Bob was mentioning, the honor of being the person that was a speaker at the dedication of the first wind farm in Arizona just a few weeks ago. But before we did that dedication, I also went to the area around Edwards Air Force Base in California, where we flew over a commercial solar scale power generator, which is generating close to 300 megawatts of solar power. 300 megawatts of solar power. So when we talk about where we want to go, where we believe that just in 3 states we can be at a point where we will generate 5,000 megawatts, equivalent of 15 coal-fired power plants, that they will be permitted by the end of next year. We believe that we can get that done. And we talk about the Atlantic and the fact that there is huge wind energy potential that has been studied and determined to be out there by the National Renewable Energy Lab for many years. We know that we can harness that energy as well, because if the United Kingdom and if Denmark could do it, we know that we can do it. And we know that the quality of the wind actually blowing in the Atlantic is better quality than even the wind that we've been able to harness in the onshore. And we also know, because of the way that the Atlantic slopes out, it is not in deep waters where we have the great potential to be able to install this wind power. And because of the fact that all you have to do is to take the electricity from those wind turbines and put them into an already existing grid, you don't have the same transmission challenges that we have with respect to the onshore, although we are working on the transmission challenges as well. So what we're working on here across the board is something which is very exciting. And it is part of what I believe, and I have spoken to the President about this, that we are implementing the President's vision with respect to the clean energy economy, and we're doing that through the executive powers of this government. And I do believe that we will succeed. I'm convinced. I'm convinced of that fact. And when all is said and done, we will have contributed greatly to the President's vision to get us to greater energy independence here in America, to create millions of jobs that are clean jobs here in the United States of America, and that will protect our children from the dangers of pollution. With that, what I'd like to do is to open it up for questions of any of the members of the panel. Congresswoman Napolitano.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And it's very exciting, wonderful news, and I look forward to a great working relationship. You've been great. Thank you for the job that you are doing. One of the things that comes to mind as we're listening is, this is wonderful. First, I've heard about a lot of the new technology of everything else. Your working relationships are going to be with federal and state. How about Congress? Let us know so we can be able to help move forward any legislation or be able to move those things forward. And that's just a comment that I look forward to working with you on. You've been Your staff has been wonderful, that's not a problem. But the other agencies, so that we know and work together in areas that may overlap our area of jurisdiction. And that's something that I look forward to. In job development, job training, can we begin to look at helping establish new entrepreneurships with whether it's SBA or any of the other agencies to be able to establish manufacturing in the U.S. and create jobs here, but also to train our youngsters, our people, the people who are unemployed in those areas. And it's amazing. The hydrokinetic, I've only heard of it, portions of it, to hear that it is becoming a reality in some of the areas. I could go on, but I'll let somebody else do it. Take another one.
Oh, thank you very much, Grace. Both those points are very well taken, and we are, in fact, working with members of Congress, and we'll continue to work with them and to enhance our efforts as well, and not only the Department of Interior, but throughout the green energy team for President Obama. We work closely together. We have meetings. We had one at the Department of Interior just in the last week. We have one later on this afternoon. And our agenda here is, yes, to implement what we can through the executive powers of government, but also to make sure that at the end of the day, we have moved forward with comprehensive energy and climate change legislation. So you will be hearing a lot from us, and I think particularly in your committee, you will hear a lot from Mike Connor with respect to what we believe the potential is with respect to what we call small hydro. And with respect to job training, your former colleague, Secretary Hilda Solis, is leading an effort on behalf of President Obama in terms of green jobs, and very focused on the training needs that we'll require in order to be able to stand up these industries and the jobs that are associated with it. Congressman Jay Inslee in the back, and then we'll come over here to everybody else.
Mr. Secretary, thanks for getting this department going. We really appreciate this rapid work you're doing. It's very much noted. We appreciate it. Two questions on offshore wind, wave, and turbine. Should we be considering sort of a zoning process offshore, like we have on BLM land a little bit, in advance of even applicants for development? Should we be developing sort of zones for offshore wind, wave, and tidal? Is that something that is in the works? Second, do you have a relationship with NOAA like you have worked with an MOA with FERC? And the reason I say that is that now on the West Coast with some wind and tidal projects, we have some issues. NOAA's developing a way to deal with this. Is there any progress we can make in the relationship with NOAA on offshore wind?
Wilma, you want to take a stab at that? You or Liz?
We actually are working very closely with the President's Ocean Policy Task Force to work closely with NOAA on issues about how we reflect varying ocean uses. At the same time, the Minerals Management Service has actually worked for years to help resolve conflicts in various ocean uses, whether they're environmental uses or conflicts with DOD and so on. We do set aside areas that aren't appropriate for some kinds of development, and that has been part of our process throughout.
Let me just say on that question, it is important that we work together as one United States of America government, Jay, and so we have had and will continue to have conversations with Secretary of Commerce Gary Locke and with Jane Lubchenco, the Undersecretary who runs NOAA, and those conversations have been ongoing, and there's many more of those conversations that we do need to have. All right. We have about 30 minutes here, right? Is that 30 minutes, Brian? So how many people want to ask questions? Raise your hands. God, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, man, there's about 50 questions. Okay. Here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to go boy, girl, boy, girl. So, young girl, boy. So, woman over here. Yes, right there.
Secretary, question for Liz Birnbaum on offshore wind as well. You talked a lot about
Okay, and can you say your name out loud so everybody can hear you all the way across the other side of the White House?
I'm Kate Gordon of the Center
Kate.
for American Progress. Honored to have taken over for Chip Batten in her job as Vice President of the Energy Program. Question about offshore wind development in the Great Lakes. Obviously, there's jurisdictional issues, but I'm wondering to what extent you're working with the folks thinking about the Great Lakes when looking at technology issues, and sort of, are you doing technology transfer with people looking at the Great Lakes? Are you thinking about ways of spurring that development as you're looking at the coast, and sort of how you're doing those relationships?
We have not heard any interest like we have in the Atlantic, on specific energy projects in the Great Lakes at this point. Of course, a lot of what people are talking about are in state waters, but we have not heard any substantial interest. The most aggressive interest is really along the Atlantic coast in the Northeast.
I have a great follow-up to that, and I'm a boy.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Secretary Salazar. I'm Sean Logan, Director for the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, and on behalf of Governor Strickland, thanks for putting this together. We have a keen interest in wind development, and specifically, we're in competition with Ontario. Their Green Energy Act put a 6-month shot clock on streamlining permits in their portion of Lake Erie and the other Great Lakes that they have. So on behalf of the 8 Great Lakes states, and not all of them, some are here probably, but as a member of the Great Lakes Commission, I just presented Thursday in Cleveland to the Council on Environmental Quality, Interagency Ocean Policy Task Force. We also, Ontario also has a 19 cents a kilowatt an hour feed-in tariff. The average production of electricity in Ohio is 8 cents because 90% of our energy is coal-fired. And I know that that's have different opinions in the room, but the reality is Governor Strickland is very committed to 25% of advanced energy by 2025, with half of that coming from renewables. So we also have a keen interest in serious clean coal technology. But there's certain impediments, such as what I understand the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service would allow a demonstration wind turbine, but not allow the electricity to be sold. That just doesn't make sense. And the 20% of the world's fresh water, as you know, in the Great Lakes, is held in public trust by the states and the 2 provinces. So we have a very keen interest in streamlining. We have a monthly call with the Corps, the Coast Guard, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and we'd like and love to involve. Now Ontario is going to be involved in it as well. But we have a very keen interest in, would love to have a more streamlined approach. One of the key ingredients, as was mentioned, is avian and bat studies, and we're working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on an aerial surveillance, but we need a really robust database because we just don't have the information that we need. Because Ohio, Western Lake Erie Basin, is the 2nd choke point in the Mississippi Flyway, Eastern Flyway. So I just would throw that out there, and thanks for letting me barge in.
Thank you, Sean. Let me make just a quick comment on that. I think that's why these types of forum are very important, because we learn additional things from all of you. And we obviously have heard loud and clear from the governors and leaders along the Atlantic about their great vision and energy with respect to renewable energy projects in offshore wind. And so they have projects, they have financing, they're ready to go. Have not heard as much noise, frankly, in terms of the interest in the Great Lakes, but we take this as a very serious contribution to our renewable energy agenda. And because it's within your jurisdiction, it's not something that MMS oversees, but nonetheless, we interface with that agenda because through Fish and Wildlife, we ultimately will have a say relative to the development of those clean energy futures. And so when you hear from Sam Hamilton and Tom Strickland later on this afternoon, I'm sure that they will address how we are trying to be proactive to avoid the kinds of conflicts that sometimes emerge when we're trying to do energy development and at the same time carrying out our responsibilities to protect very important species for our planet. Yes, down here, in the middle. You're boy. I gotta go girl. Oh, go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Secretary. My name is Sam Kay. I'm chairman of Nez Perce Tribe out in Lafayette, Idaho. I've heard a lot of good comments. One thing I'd like to mention is, we've heard some mention of tribes in the discussion, and I think early on that the tribes need to be directly involved, especially, I'm speaking only for my tribe. Other tribes have similar interests, but in the Great Northwest, we have hunting, fishing, and gathering rights that were reserved by treaty with the United States government. And take for Idaho, for example, is 63% federally owned. And the anadromous fish issues in the Northwest, where they spawn in fresh water in the upper reaches of Idaho and go clear up into the Gulf of Alaska. So when we talk about public lands, we need to consider the interest, the treaty reserve interest that tribes have in a lot of these issues that are being discussed today. And also, I'd just like to mention real quickly, there was a mention about rights of way. and, tribal lands as well as individually owned lands would be impacted from that as well. But my question to the panel would be, I know the President has talked about, some of the political, economical solutions to some of the problems that this country faces, and this is one of them. But he also said that science must take its rightful place in a lot of these issues. So that's my question to the panel, is how is the science-based issues going to fit in to these issues that we're talking about today? Thank you.
It's a great question, Sam, and I'll have the panel take it. I will say to you that, and Larry Echohawk, I'm sure will reflect this later on, we believe that in everything that we do at the Department of Interior, whether it's our national parks agenda or our renewable energy agenda, that the nation's first Americans need to have a seat at the table. And so we're working to make sure that this renewable energy revolution that we're seeing is one that does not bypass Native American country, and it will not under President Obama's administration. Who wants to take this one in a broader sense?
Let me start, and then please add to these comments. We very much are committed to a science-based and thoughtful sort of land use planning exercise. We're looking very closely at eco-regional assessments. BLM is doing a very thorough study of each of the solar or renewable energy zones that we have preliminarily mapped. That involves an exhaustive NEPA exercise in each of the 24 zones. This department is spending, I think, $41 million of the stimulus money on that kind of thorough ecosystem evaluation and zoning for solar and wind and transmission, geothermal. So we want to do this right. As Bob Abbey said from the start, we want to make sure that we have a thorough stakeholder process and input before siting renewable energy on public lands. Obviously, the wildlife impacts are enormous, and Fish and Wildlife is very directly engaged with BLM in terms of mitigation. And we really rely on the partners in this room to do that early and often. So we need to not only make the right siting decision, but also consider the impacts of renewable energy development and the appropriate mitigation. Wilma, do you want to add to that?
The only thing I'll add is basically 2 points on each of your two issues. One, we are very interested in making sure that the tribal leaders are well represented in what we do. So we intend to reach out to the tribes to make sure that they are an integral part of our efforts. Secondly, with respect to the science issue, our mandate is to proceed with the responsible development of renewable energy. Indeed, our comprehensive energy program, we are proceeding responsibly. And integral to that is to proceed in a way that is environmentally sound and scientifically grounded. And those are two important aspects of what we'll be doing. So we'll be making sure from an environmental perspective that we have done all we need to do and considered all we need to consider in making our planning decisions, in making siting decisions, in making permitting decisions. And similarly, with respect to the science aspect of it, we're going to make sure that we take the proper steps, the NEPA analyses and other analyses that we need to take, the studies that we need to undertake in order to inform the decisions that we make. So in both areas, we intend that they will be play an integral part in our work.
Bob Abbey, from our questions on the web from the City of Brotherly Love, Philadelphia. The question is, if you want to create jobs, wouldn't wind and solar farms be the ideal way to supplement power to our cities and create jobs?
Well, I think there's a simple answer to that one. It is. I mean, certainly renewable energy does provide for jobs. Many of these projects that are being proposed are in some of the more rural areas that are hurting from the economic downturn. And so, for example, Mr. Secretary, the dedication that we attended in northern Arizona, where it provided 200 additional jobs for that local area. And even though after the construction, some of those jobs moved elsewhere, there was a number that did stay to actually help to manage and maintain that site. There will be a phase 2 in the construction of that particular wind farm that will bring some of those jobs back into that local area. I think we'd see examples of this throughout the United States as we move forward aggressively with the renewable energy projects.
Thank you, Bob. And moving over here now to this side, who, let me see, Sam was last there, so I get a woman from this side. Yes, up front.
Thank you. Chairwoman Monique Chopper from Campo Band of Mission Indians of the Kumeyaay Nation. My tribe is the first tribe in the nation that has a 50-megawatt wind project on our tribal lands. We are currently looking at expanding to 160 megawatt, up to possibly 300 megawatts. But what we were asking is a limited National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, scope on the tribal lands for tribal government development projects and/or enabling authority to perform the environmental review under the Tribal Energy Resource Agreement, TERA. We appreciate the NEPA evaluation process. However, Campo requests that the Department of Interior fulfill the intent of the NEPA by limiting the scope of NEPA on reservations to the impact or the benefit of the project on the tribe and the reservation tribal population only. We're right now beginning the process of starting our NEPA. And it seems to me that it's going to be difficult when you have, your butterflies and your toads and everything, that we be able to not bypass it, but to keep the scope of the project to limit it to our lands, because we're the ones that's going to be mostly impacted.
Let me first say I congratulate you and the tribe for moving as expeditiously as you have moved on wind energy. Again, when sometimes when we start talking about megawatts, people can get lost in the numbers very quickly, but the kind of power generator you're talking about is essentially the equivalence of a coal-fired power plant if you are able to build it out, and you're already well on your way to getting it done. A conversation that Assistant Secretary Larry Echohawk and I have had is how we perhaps create a task force or a focus group of people just to work on renewable energy on tribal lands. About 66 million acres of the country is held in trust for Indian tribes across the country, and there's huge potential with respect to energy in those places. And so one of the things that I think you'll hear about from Larry is how we can move forward with that renewable energy agenda. And with regard to the specific issue on the environmental compliance issues, let us take a look at that and see whether there is something that we might be able to do. Yes, up here in the front.
Bernie Carl, Chena Hot Springs, Fairbanks, Alaska. Thank you for the opportunity. One size doesn't fit all. So I was just wondering, what do you have in mind for Alaska? We're the largest land mass in the United States. A lot of the land that you manage is in Alaska. And as you know, I think you were there a while ago, I believe. Weren't you in Alaska maybe a month or two ago?
Been there, yes.
And so you know that one size doesn't fit all. We have such a short season for doing construction. We have 2,000 foot of permafrost in half of the state. And I was wondering if there isn't some way to streamline what happens in Alaska. What do you have in mind for streamlining? We have the highest energy cost in the world. In one arm we're addicted to oil, and the other arm we're addicted to greed. And that seems to be the problem with America. Well, I'm sorry, but we are addicted to it. Two of the worst drugs in the world. And it seems to me that what a breath of fresh air to come here today. I actually believe that you people have an idea what you're doing. It's impressive. No. I mean, that doesn't happen very often in the federal government. I could sugarcoat this if you'd like, but I just as soon tell you the way it is. I'm impressed. I'm impressed because you come from a large family, and you understand what it is to have no electricity. You understand what it is to not have a telephone. You walk the walk. You talk the talk. A lot of people in Washington don't do that at all. There's a lot of BS. You thought I was going to say bullshit. I can't do that. There's a lot of BS out here. And so I'm impressed with the fact that you do get it, sir.
Thank you.
And so what do we have for Alaska? Because you see, Alaska could lead this parade. America could lead it, but we have the highest energy cost. And at Chena Hot Springs, I believe we're going to be the first totally renewable community in the world. Why? Because we have the two ingredients that America's lacking. It doesn't take money, and it doesn't take brains. We have that. It takes two things we don't have. We have no vision, and we have no passion. Those are the two ingredients that we're lacking. We have that at Chena, and that's why we're going to be sustainable. We make our power from 160-degree water, just taking a hug from the earth, putting everything back. We grow our food. We make some hydrogen. And that's what we need to do. That's what you need to do. So I'm pleased to hear what you're doing. But now, what kind of special deal do you have for Alaskans? Because we need a special deal, because we are special.
Bernie, thank you for coming from Alaska to this forum, and thank you for bringing your passion to it. I think maybe since Bob Abbey has so much acreage up in Alaska, and maybe Wilma, I will have them respond to that. But let me make just one quick comment in response. You are right that there are many things that can be done, and things don't. It's not always just one size fits all. And if you think about small wind microturbines or solar scale power that basically can help with homes and a whole host of other things, there's a lot that can be done. I met with a group of Native Americans on Friday where they described to me the kind of solar energy projects that are being installed in the Pine Ridge Reservation and in several other reservations, which are bringing heating into homes at a very low cost, and for the first time creating a quality of life for communities that really have not had it. So there's a lot that we can do, a lot that we will do, and Bob and Wilma, you want to take a stab at amplifying on the answer?
I would welcome the opportunity. First, thank you for your passion. Thank you for your vision. The Bureau of Land Management and throughout the Department of Interior are trying to streamline the processes so that we can review these project proposals and make a decision timely. And the way to do so and to have any chance for success is to engage all the affected stakeholders early in the process so that we understand fully what the concerns are, what the issues are that need to be addressed as part of the evaluations and the analysis. And by doing so, by engaging those stakeholders early in the process, I really do believe that we'll be successful in making good decisions and getting some of these projects on the ground quickly. Now, one of the ways that we are trying to streamline the process is by moving forward aggressively in the completion of programmatic environmental impact statements. We've completed programmatic environmental statements in concert with the U.S. Forest Service on geothermal resources throughout the United States. We have worked with others on a programmatic environmental impact statement on wind energy in the United States. We've worked with other agencies on a programmatic environmental impact statement on transmission. And now we're involved working aggressively with the Department of Energy in preparing a programmatic environmental impact statement on solar. By getting out in front of the issues, we are identifying what those potential consequences of approvals would be if projects were approved in place where they're being proposed. And then we can move, again, streamlining through the NEPA process by tiering from those programmatic impact statements and in making decisions, again, more timely. So we do understand the need to fully evaluate each of the proposals. We understand that not every application or project is going to be approved, and we want to be smart about which projects are going to be approved by the Department of Interior and which ones and where they will be placed.
Go ahead, Liz.
Just to add one thing, while Alaska has some unique challenges, you may also have some unique advantages. Cook Inlet has a very strong tidal current, and in the new technology arena, one of the real challenges is figuring out how to take advantage of that to generate energy for Alaska. We were recently working with a gentleman who was a fisherman who had been looking at how his fishing equipment worked and decided that he could create a new screw to generate tidal energy out of the current that you have up there, and allowed him to test that in our test facility in New Jersey. So we are actually working on some of these unique challenges.
I just want to say that I think the bottom line is that as we move forward, one of the things that we want to do, and Bob mentioned it, is to be proactive. And I think you're right. One size does not necessarily fit all. And I think as we plan and as we examine the different areas, we want to make sure that we take full advantage of what particular areas has to offer. And I think that will be reflected in hopefully the success of our planning efforts.
Okay, all the way from Phoenix, Arizona, this question is online, coming right here to the Executive Office Building in Washington, D.C. I will give this one to, I think this is a Wilma Lewis Bob Abbey question. Can you please talk about the potential for geothermal energy as part of the renewable energy agenda? And while you're thinking about your response to that, Bob and Wilma, to Steve Black, online from Chicago, how is the stimulus money being spent to focus on the potential for smart grid technology and renewable energy? So Wilma and Bob.
Well, let me start, and Wilma more than likely will have something to add. As I mentioned in my remarks, there's 111 million acres of public lands that have been identified as having commercial potential from geothermal resources in the western United States. This is one of probably the greatest opportunities we have to develop renewable energy and to provide that source to augment our national energy portfolio. And I say that because the footprint associated with geothermal energy is much less than that associated with wind energy and solar energy. So I do think that geothermal has a great potential and a great future for helping us meet our energy needs.
The only other thing I'll add is that we're obviously continuing to be interested in new technologies, just like in other areas, new technologies for tapping the geothermal resources that exist on the public lands.
Okay, Steve, smart grid.
Mr. Secretary,
Stimulus.
thank you. The President just last week announced with Secretary Chu at the Department of Energy $3.4 billion in grants under the stimulus bill for smart grid technology. These grants went to hundreds of utilities and electric providers throughout the country to upgrade a grid and to build a grid that is smarter, more secure, more reliable, and that will ultimately give consumers a choice and just more power in terms of how to consume and price their electricity. And the smart grid also will enable renewable resources like wind and solar that are more intermittent to plug into the grid and to even out electricity flows, balance between load and supply. So those investments are enormous. Obviously, that's a down payment on what will ultimately be a larger investment in the future.
All right, now here's what we have. We have 10 minutes to go before we move on to the next panel. And so if you want to ask a question, I want to see your hand raised. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to keep your question or your comment very short, and we'll try to get through each one of your statements, and then we'll come back and we'll have the panel members give a closing comment where they'll try to wrap up responses to your questions. So, okay, if you have a question or comment, I want you to raise your hand or forever hold your peace. Okay, let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and 10 minutes to go. So you have about 20 seconds each, okay? And otherwise we won't be able to get this done. But we're here to listen and to hear from you, and that's why this is important. So I'm going to start right here, and if you didn't raise your hand, you can't raise it, okay? So we'll start right here in the corner.
Good morning, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for inviting me to this prestigious event. My name is Ralph Sampson, Jr. I'm chairman of the Confederated Tribes and Bands of the Yakama Nation. And I have a question, more of a comment. Assistant Secretary answered some of the questions I wanted to ask about the offshore. But I just wanted to make a statement in relationship to that. Indian tribes have treaties and rights to fish and gather in oceans and to fish for salmon and to protect rivers and streams directly impacted by oceans. Therefore, tribes must be included.
I'm going to hold you 20 seconds, so let's punch to your question.
Okay. I just wanted to make that comment to make sure that we're included in there and you recognize that fact. And also, I'd like to ask Secretary to include tribes into biomass technology for renewable energy projects. Tribal entities have a great lot of resources to offer in
Treaty
biomass.
rights, biomass technology. Okay, anybody else in that first row? Okay, moving across the second row. Let's go. Stand up quickly, 20 seconds each.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Real quickly,
Your name
my
first.
name's Arvin Trujillo. I'm the Executive Director for the Division of Natural Resources for the Navajo Nation. We're currently in the process of building a 100-megawatt project on our reservation. It's our first one. We're looking at a potential of 1,300 to 1,800 megawatts of
Solar?
wind.
Wind?
1,300 to 1,800 megawatts of wind in northern Arizona over the next few years. I would like to stress, and I guess this would be to Assistant Secretary Lewis as well as Councilor Blatt, looking at the efficiencies that you're wanting to achieve. If we could follow what we've done with water rights, the commissioner's back here, he's been involved in our water settlements. The team process, the federal team process, and bringing that for tribes in renewable energy would be tremendously
So
helpful.
an organizational effort focused
Yes.
on renewable energy with Indian tribes. I got you, Art.
Taxation and financing.
Okay, next to you. 20 seconds.
Chino with the Natural Resources Defense Council.
Your first name?
Sharon.
Sharon.
Buccino. And I welcome the current, I'd like to tap in and get some information on the current thinking on two issues. One is how you value the renewables, what kind of legal structure we're going to use to value those on public lands. And the second question is whether there has been assessment of how much renewable energy we can get from the lands that are already developed for oil and gas.
Okay. All right, we've done the second row, third row. Remember, if you didn't raise your hand earlier on, you can't raise your hand now. Okay? Right here in the corner and then the middle.
Gary Morishima from the Intertribal Timber Council and the Quinault Nation. Most of the comments today have centered around energy production. I also would recommend that you look very strongly at the transportation industry. My second comment is that when you're dealing with energy independence and security, how the Department of Interior is dealing with things like foreign supplies of rare earth minerals that are necessary for the generation of electricity in some of the turbines.
Okay, thank you. In the middle, that same row, right in the middle.
Pam Miller, Northern Alaska Environmental Center, Fairbanks. Thank you for
Your
coming.
name?
Pam Miller.
Pam Miller.
Thank you for coming to Alaska earlier today. Earlier this year, we have the longest coastline of any state in the United States. And I know that we can gain 17 times more energy from conservation than oil drilling. We already have shown that. I wonder what the department is doing both for energy efficiency measures, policy, and alternative energy in Alaska's long coastline. Would you consider a timeout on oil and gas development and exploration until we look at the alternative energy on our coast? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pam. Okay, next row, I think we have anybody, no, okay, following row back there, white card up in the air.
Yes, thank you. My name is Ray Soroy. I'm from Maine. We also have a long coastline.
First name?
Ray.
Ray. Okay.
I'm a business owner, and the green economy is going to be driven by business. We're a free enterprise system, and I think the biggest challenge is going to be for our government is going to be to utilize the free enterprise system to make the green economy happen. A year ago today, we didn't know who the next president was, and my hat's off to all of you for all that you have accomplished in a short period of time. But there's only one thing that can move faster than government, and that's business. And so the trick is going to be to put in the incentives that are necessary for small business owners and large business owners to make the thing happen.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. All right, right next, please.
Hi, my name is Joe Childers. I'm president of United Fishermen of Alaska. I'm from Juneau. I represent 37 fishing associations that harvest collectively 2.5 million tons of sustainably produced seafood out of the Gulf of Alaska and the Bering Sea. We are also being challenged right now by climate change. Potentially, we're going to have a lot of access issues in the ocean due to carbon pollution. When you look forward to using the ocean for other purposes, where you create permanent installations, you restrict our access and our ability to move around. And I would say right now that our ability to provide seafood protein is also a national priority. And you need to consider zoning seriously in the oceans as you go forward when there is very large, vibrant commercial fisheries like they have in Alaska.
Thank you, Bill. Okay. MEC, back in the back, the blonde woman with the glasses.
Thank you very much. I'm Kelly Carnes from Tech Vision 21. Really appreciate the work that the department has done on the offshore issues, and wanted to ask whether or not any thinking is taking place on ocean thermal energy conversion technology. That would seem to be a great opportunity to provide baseload power and fresh water to the insular areas that are within the department's jurisdiction, as well as Hawaii and the mainland off the coast of Florida.
Okay. In the back.
Bob Anderson, would you entertain a modification or support for modification to NEPA, the NEPA process, to provide for doing environmental statements as opposed to environmental impact statements, environmental analysis as opposed to impact statements, and also provide for a 60-day comment period for the public and without an appeal after that?
This is for renewable energy projects?
For renewable energy projects only.
Thanks. Thank you, Bob. Okay, the two women in the back.
Hi, I'm Lisa Bogensteiner. I'm with First Solar. First Solar has over 2 gigawatts of projects on BLM lands in California. And first of all, Mr. Secretary, we applaud your efforts working jointly with the state. We already have meetings set up this week with Steve Black and his team. So that's remarkable that those efforts are happening so quickly. One of the things we went to work with the BOTS organization and Steve's is on the mitigation for our projects on public lands.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa. Yes.
Thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Barbara Hill. I represent a nonprofit in Hyannis, Massachusetts. In 2001, America's first proposed offshore wind farm was proposed, Cape Wind. It's now 8 years later. In 2008, the draft EIS was issued. 42,000 comments were submitted to MMS. 41,000 were positive. The final EIS was issued in January of 2009. It was a historic issuance in that it was the first on an offshore wind farm. It's 9 months later. The people of Massachusetts, the large majority of the people of Massachusetts want to see this project built. The state of Massachusetts want to see this project built. And I live on Cape Cod. I want to see this project built. And I'd love to know when we're going to get a record of decision out of Minerals Management Service.
Okay, here's what. Wow. Here's what we're gonna do. A direct question and to the point. Now I know there were lots of other questions over here. We're gonna have another panel, and what I'm gonna do, if you will reserve your questions, okay, for the next panel, so that we keep our agenda on time, I will promise to come back and call on this side of the room so that you can all ask your questions. Okay. But with that, what I'd like to do is I will have each of the panelists close up, and you don't have to answer all these questions because I can do it if you want. So let me tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a few general closing remarks and then have you close it off. Okay. First of all, the questions that you all raised are important questions. Some of them are questions of law. Some of them are questions related to matters that we are currently processing. Cape Wind, for example, is you are very direct in your question on Cape Wind. The future of Alaska and what we do with a whole host of issues from the Outer Continental Shelf and potential oil and gas exploration, as well as a whole host of other initiatives that we have underway there. There are huge questions which you all raise, and I'm not going to be able to answer them all today, but I will say this. We want this government to work on behalf of the people of this country, and I do believe that things that end up getting caught up in inordinate and continuing delay is not something which I took on the Secretary of Interior job for. And so we will work through these issues to get to the conclusion that is required, that will be driven by the potential as well as the answer that is given to us by the science. And that we will do with respect to Cape Wind, that we will do with respect to many of the other projects which you all have talked about here. There's a lot of the issues that you raise, from efficiency to assessment of what we can already do with respect to lands that have, and parts of the ocean that have been already leased for oil and gas. There's great potential with respect to all of those issues. I want to just say that for us at Interior and for this president, he wants us to walk the talk. And that means that in the Department of the Interior, we are looking at ways in which we can be much more efficient and reduce our carbon footprint. I issued a secretarial order, and we have our Assistant Secretary for Policy Management and Budget putting together a plan for how we do that. When I was at Yosemite a few weeks ago, I was very impressed with what's happening with the hybrid clean energy tour buses that we have there at Yosemite, and the whole effort that we have with respect to recycling. And many of you in your questions, I think, may allude to an opportunity which I think is great for the Department of the Interior, and that is that we host 500 million people a year. 500 million people a year, from the great parks that everybody knows, like Yellowstone and the Statue of Liberty, to the National Mall, to a whole host of other places. And we have an opportunity to also be educators. Yes, we're suppliers of energy, both conventional as well as renewable. Yes, we're catchers of carbon, which you will hear from on the next panel. But there's also a great educational role that we can play with the host of issues that all of you raised. I am going to call on each of the panel members to give a 60-second closing remark, and then we'll take a 10-minute break. Steve Black.
Thank you, sir. I want to emphasize and touch on the valuation question in connection with the Secretary's closing comments, because it's so important. One of the Secretary's highest priorities is to scale up the production, generation, and transmission of renewable energy on public lands. Another one that's equally important is the protection of our treasured landscapes, and to preserve and be good stewards of the land that we manage for future generations. And those two priorities will help answer the valuation question, the management question. It's very impressive that we have some 3 gigawatts of solar power contracts in California that are already under the price of a comparable natural gas combined cycle power plant. And as we bring the price of solar down, we will scale up production of renewable energy on public lands. But we do need we need the proper sort of value equation. And so we're looking at that. We want to protect and honor the value of public lands for future generations. This partnership, as I mentioned earlier, is very important going forward. So we appreciate this dialogue. Hope you will continue to contact us and help us answer some of these difficult questions.
Assistant Secretary Wilma Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'll just make a couple general comments. When I was U.S. Attorney here in D.C., there were a number of things that I learned, but two have stayed with me into this job. One was that at the time, when my focus then was on law enforcement, I realized that we couldn't do the job of law enforcement alone, that it was important to have partners, and they played an integral role here. I think it's the same here. It's important to have partners, and just sitting and listening to the comments that were made, the questions that were asked, it is definitely important to have partners in this effort if we're going to get to the ultimate goal. The second thing that stayed with me was the importance of reaching out. I did a lot of community meetings where I went out and just listened, spoke, but did a lot of listening as well, and then went back to the office and talked about how we could deal with a number of the issues that came up and implement a number of the suggestions that were made. It's the same here. A lot has come up that reinforces our need for outreach to our stakeholders, listening to the stakeholders, and I thank you all for all that you have contributed here, and I look forward to engaging with you further in the future.
Director Abbey.
Well, first, let me thank each of you for traveling to attend this session and to share your input with all of us. We all learn from your insights and your wisdom. We have spent an inordinate amount of time this morning talking about energy development, and we've stayed somewhat silent about what we can all do to contribute in advancing our energy policies in this nation, and that's conservation. And you know, one of the biggest values that we can add is to share with those visitors to our public lands, to our national parks, to our fish and wildlife refuges, information that they can take home with them so that they too can be better stewards of our nation's natural resources. So we look forward to continuing this working relationship, to hear further from you as we move forward in analyzing the projects that are before us and accomplishing some great things over the course of the next couple of years.
Director Birnbaum.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'm just thrilled to hear all the energy in this room that is focused on the idea of our being able to find these renewable energy technologies and make them work offshore. We are dedicated to working closely with the tribes, with the states, and with all the stakeholders to make sure this is a process that works. But at the same time, we do recognize that industry is where it's going to happen, and that the innovation that we're going to get from people who are interested in investing and making this new technology happen offshore is where we want to be and who we want to work with. So hopefully we can create a process that creates the atmosphere that allows those new technologies to be developed and to actually establish these new industries offshore. So I'm just thrilled that we have an opportunity to work with all of you on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Will you give Liz and Bob and Wilma a round of applause for their contributions this morning? Thank you.